This video is sponsored by PCBWay. Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and this is the third video working on Strange Young Man, my 13 kilo sportsman combat robot. The first two videos I have struggled getting a weapon on here, which is off at the moment, just to make the whole robot a little bit safer as I'm working on it and also easier to move around. And this video, we are going to work on the drive system. If you missed the struggle on the weapon system, I will leave links to the other two videos down below. But today, it's all about getting this boy moving. To get this guy moving, we're going to need some things. To start with, we're going to need motors, and we are going to need gearboxes. So these all set the speed of the robot, while these and the wheels set the speed of the robot. And we should be aiming for about 50 kilometers per hour or just under, which would be really, really cool to see. The only problem is that while these gearboxes have a mounting plate on them, those mounting plates do not match up with the bolt spacings on these motors. They kind of sort of do in two, but realistically, especially for a drive system, you want all four. Also, because this chassis is an old chassis that, as mentioned in the past, has a bunch of tech debt in it, we actually need a different mounting point than the face of this. So we really need a custom bracket that goes between the gearbox and the motor. And that is where PCBWay comes in. They have made up these four very, very nice mounting brackets that have threaded holes just absolutely everywhere. So there are four on the face to hold the gearbox down to this part. And then also there are some pocketed holes to hold the motors in place. And then there are basically threaded holes on every single face bar one to hold this piece down into the chassis and also hold some mounting geometry as well. So these two on the bottom are to hold the thing down, and then the rest are to hold other plates that kind of allow some reinforcement. And these things are absolutely stunning. I always love the parts that I get from PCBWay. I mean, threading on multiple different axes would take like a whole day for me and a whole bunch of setup and just a lot of work that I probably don't have time to do at this point. So I am really, really thankful that PCBWay could help out and make these very intricate, for me at least, parts. Of course, before we get all these new shiny parts into the robot, we need to prep our motors. They need a gear on the end of them. This is a fairly straightforward process. We're going to scuff up the end of the motor shaft just a little bit. Going to apply in a little bit of green Loctite, which is for press fit joints like this. And then we're going to put the gear and the motor into this 3D printed press jig that I designed so that everything is held perfectly in line as I press the motor shaft down into the gear. All right, with gears pressed on, it is time to do the assembly here, and it's a fairly straightforward process. We literally are just bolting 4 bolts into here, taking 4 bolts out of here and putting them in there as well, and that should basically be about it. I mean, I'm also going to sit here and add Loctite to literally everything, but you should always do Loctite after you have got everything together the first time. So you put all your bolts in once, you then take them back out again. Oops, that's not a bolt hole. Let's actually get this in the bolt hole. Yeah, this is why you put Loctite in second. You bolt everything down first, make sure all of your bolt holes are lined up correctly and everything is gonna lock down perfectly. And then you add the Loctite. Once you know that everything works, and that is 4. So that is now 4 bolts in. I'm gonna snug all of those down. Then I'm going to Loctite them one by one, which basically means undoing everything I've just done to add Loctite. That's fine, you don't need to watch this bit. Cool, that is our Loctite done. So now we're going to take the back plate off this gearbox and transfer the gearbox over. Once again, we're going to put all 4 screws in first and then Loctite the screws one by one, because that is best practice. Okay, all of our bolts are loose, so we should just be able to very easily slide this back plate off We've got to be careful that we don't lose any of the gearbox or retaining ring that are in here. And then we should be able to wiggle this on and find where our bolts go, which is about there, I think. Now this step is kind of critical because we need to wiggle everything until the bolts sit down nicely and thread into the holes without cross-threading, which basically means tapping their own holes into these already very nicely tapped holes, which we absolutely don't want, because while that would work and would hold, it would destroy it for the next time I try and take this whole thing apart and put it all back together again. So it's going to be a little bit of sitting here fiddling with this until everything lines up. Cool, so that is together, and we can confirm that by spinning the motor and we get an output shaft, or the output shaft spinning. That is exactly what we want to see here. So I'm now just going to take all these bolts back out, put the Loctite in them, and that'll be this 1 out of 4 done. And that is locked in, and we're just going to quickly confirm that it still moves. Yep, looks like it is all good. So now time to copy and paste 3 whole more times. And there we have it. We have 4 of these setups now done. Gearbox and motor in place, everything Loctited down and all still working. We're also basically a day later just to give the Loctite a little bit of time to set up. That just means that from now on, nothing should shake this loose. And realistically, the only thing taking this apart will be me. Well, hopefully, we'll see how we go. Now, all of these get locked into place on these bolt holes down here, and I've got some short little M6s that will do that job for us. However, before we lock all of this down, there is one more thing I want to do for this whole setup, and that is some bracing. So as you can see right now, these would literally just be held up with this block between the motor and the gearbox, which isn't great because the wheel is all the way out here and it's putting a lot of force back on this block. So I want some retaining panels that go all the way down and grab onto the faceplate of the block. So let's go and do that, which is going to be a process of cutting a lot of these out. I'm using a handsaw here because my drop saw was giving me some really weird cuts. So I figured I would just go back to what I know would get it mostly straight. Then all of the hole locations for all of these parts get marked out and then center punched so that the drill knows exactly where to go. And once that's done, all of the holes get drilled out to 4 millimeters. I'm using this as a starting drill point because larger drills can sometimes have trouble going in straight when starting a hole. So most of these then get sized up to 6 millimeters, and some of them get sized up a lot more than that to allow the front of the gearbox to go through. And done. So now we've got all of our pieces together. We've got some end caps and we've got the top plates. So we're going to sit here and put one of these together because it is something of an interesting process. Basically, we need to start by putting bolts in through the top here. I'm just finger tightening some nuts on the back of these, which does get a little bit interesting. This guy down in the bottom here needs to be done in a very specific way because there's not really a lot of room for the nylock in down there. So I kind of need to drop this guy on, move everything back, and then do it up from the top, basically. Can be a little bit fiddly. Cool, but once those have got the nylocks on, it's going to be a bit rattly because we haven't actually locked all of that down yet. We're going to do the other side next. And once we've done that, we can put our motors in. 1 and 2. Cool, so there we go. We've got those 2 in. It is now time to lock our motors in. So basically that is done by feeding wires up in through this hole. Well, actually, going this way first, then feeding wires up through this hole. It's all a little bit of a dance to try and get all the pieces where they need to be, all at the same time. It is doable, it's just finicky. There we go. And then we lock the bolts into the faceplate. by literally just at first finger tightening them, and then we're going to tighten them down with a hex key in a second, an Allen wrench in a second. And that's one motor into our setup. Now, you might even be able to tell at this point why we need to put the faceplate on before we put everything else together, and that is because there is a nylock down in this corner, which is now literally impossible to get to. It should self-tighten against the wall here. At least that is the plan. If it doesn't, well, it's going to be held on with one nylock and some dreams, basically. But it should do the job. So now I'm going to do the other side. Everything needs to stay loose. We've got some other bolt holes that I can attach bolts into. But again, everything needs to stay loose until we actually lock these gearboxes down into the chassis, just so that we know that everything will actually line up. And then once all of that is all together and in the chassis, we can tighten all these bolts down. But for now, they all just get finger tight and with a little bit of space so they can still move around a little bit as they need to. Okay, we have everything kind of loosely set up. There's a lot of rock and shake in here still. Now, before we can lock all of this down, we are going to put on two more separate things. So we've got a battery box, which goes over here, and this just gets bolted in, so we don't even really worry about doing that on camera. And then we've also got wheels. Now, these wheels aren't going to work like this as smooth TPU. That has got no grip, so let's fix that problem. And here is our solution. We have some old bike tire, we have some super glue, and we have some screws. All of this together is going to add tread to these wheels. But the first thing I need to do is cut this down into something more manageable. Also, as this is bike tire, oh yeah, in the edge here there is steel cable. Obviously we don't want that, but I don't care. I only really want a strip from down in here. I don't even really want these treads on it, which is good because the middle strip has no tread. Okay, I have my strip of tire cut, I have a wheel, let's get these two things together. So we're literally just going to start by adding some glue and forcing the end down, and then we're going to run a screw into that while the glue is setting up. This is the whole process. It is just a glue and screw process, effectively. The more glue and the more screws, the better, really, because we don't want this tire going anywhere. So I'm going to hold this for just a couple of seconds, and then we're going to run a wood screw into it. Sometimes I'll also coat the tip of the wood screw in a little bit of super glue as well. It just helps hold things together a little better. And we also do need to make sure that not only do things hold, but they're going to go down fairly straight. Okay, so I've moved my finger back a little bit. Put a little dab of super glue on the wood screw, and now I don't want to lose it. So gently, gently, come here. Okay, so that is our first screw in. I usually try and double them up right at the contact point, but for this one, I might not need to do that actually, because the wheels are fairly thin. I might be able to get away with the one there, but you can see we've got basically all the way around. It's not quite perfect. It could be a little bit better, but now we're just going to start adding more glue and adding more screws as we go here. Basically being as generous as I want to be, or as I can be with this super glue, because super glue doesn't stick well to, well, not many things stick well in this equation, so the more chance we can give this of bonding, the better. Oh, I stuck my fingers together already. It's bound to happen at some point. It's just happened early. And now we're just going to put another screw in. Hopefully our screws go in far enough that the head is under the rubber. That's the ideal. This is coming together. I'm getting a bit of heat off of this because it seems to be a bit of an exothermic thing going on. It's not a huge deal, but I'm going to try and work a little quicker now. And there we go, that is one wheel. The rest get done like this. So there we go. That is 4 complete wheels. There's only one of them that I got just a little bit of a gap. I didn't quite cut my tire tread exactly as it needed to be, but these 4 should do the trick, and they are fairly grippy. So I'm hoping that this would be a good way to drive the robot. I had intended to do some polyurethane wheels. I might try and get those done as well, but I am starting to run out of time with this robot. The repeated weapon failures really sucked up way more time than I expected them to. Yeah, so we're kind of doing the bits we can right now. Anyway, speaking of, let's get all of this onto the actual robot. So as you can see, I've done some of these wheels already, but I figured we would do one on camera together so that you'll all see how this goes. So all of this side is still completely unconnected, and first we need a hub. And this hub basically gets 4 bolts put straight into it. These are M4 bolts. As hard as I could get M4 bolts, because you can't get, or at least I couldn't find, like 12.6 or whatever it is, hardness M4 bolts, which would have been ideal here probably. Actually, then again, may not make that much difference. They're going into TPU, so TPU is going to be the weak point there. With the 4 screws in, then this just slides on. I've orientated the flat of the shaft to be basically virtually up right now. And then let's get in a little closer. So as you can see, the heads of these bolts basically need to sit just touching. Not quite touching, but only just not touching. That's where we want those. So we're gonna lock this guy down about like that, I think. That gets us there, and then we're gonna flip this around, make sure that the bolts don't rub, which when they're pulled out, they don't, and they will be pulled out because they're going to get bolted down in a second. And then we're going to tighten this back one up as well. And that is how all of that sits down. Look at that. That is great. Now, I'm going to take our wheel, it's got a recess in one side, and then we just line up all of our bolt holes in our wheel with our bolts, like so, and we push. And that goes all the way through until we have bolts coming out the other side. Now we need to get nuts onto the end of these, and the way we're doing that is with this. It's a little stamped steel hex wrench that does just slot in behind enough to grab hold of those bolts or those bolt heads and allow me to put a nylock on the front so that everything just locks down and sits down really nicely. Now, the easiest way I've found to do this is to start these by hand and then grab them with locking pliers and just twist them. That is started by hand. Next one. All of those are now started by hand, so now we do the tricky bit of grabbing these with our locking pliers. Then we're going to slide the other wrench in the back and then just twist. And that will lock down that bolt, which means 2 things. 1, it doesn't touch on the back anymore, and 2, it holds our wheel onto our little hub inside there. So I just need to now go around. Okay, so that is now all in. I've also put the weapon motor back in and got the belt in. I've also tightened the belt up just that little bit more this time, so hopefully when we stick the axe into something, we can actually retract it as well. Next up, I am going to put all the electronics in so that the next thing you guys see is a drive test. But I do want to point this out. This is my new screw switch. It has all of the internals of a contactor with a screw to actuate all of that. This is very similar in build to the heavyweight switch that I designed. It's probably a little bit overkill for what I'm doing today, but I want to test it out. So it is going in this robot. In fact, it should go about there. It is going to be a tight fit. There isn't actually all that much space in this thing, despite the fact that it is fairly large. Yeah, all of the wiring is going to be an interesting routing challenge. I think I'll say that much. All right, you guys have a better view of this than I do right now. I am a little way back on a stone step so that if the robot takes off, it's not going to take out my legs, because I kind of like my legs. I've got my wireless microphone on so that you can hear me while we do this, but yeah, we're a little ways back. Anyway, robot is powered up and controller is ready to go. So first of all, let's just do a quick weapons test. Okay. Weapons looking good. That is good to see. Now, the thing we are here for, which is the drive test. Oh, okay. Yeah, this thing is really quick. That's going to be really, really good. It is leaving a ton of dead rubber everywhere though, which, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. That's going to be interesting. Anyway, I think that's going to be our little test here, unless I set this up again. Let's set this up again. Okay, we're reset. Let's try again. Oh yeah. I am barely touching the sticks and we're getting wheel slip off this thing. This has got so much drive power underneath it. Oh, it's going to be absolutely insane. I cannot wait. Yeah. I am having a bit of an issue where wheels have loosened a little bit because I didn't Loctite them, but yeah, this is going to work really, really well. Okay, cool. And there we go, it drives. So the drive, as it turns out, was a lot easier to implement than the weapon system. We had a lot of failures with the weapon system, but the drive seems to be working right now. First try, effectively, which is great. I do not have time for anything to go wrong here. So I'm very, very, very happy that we got this working as it currently sits. So, I am not very far out from the competition for this right now, so I'm going to turn around and tear all this back down, paint the bits that need to be painted, and get it ready to go. I do need to go ahead and Loctite all of the drive system, but I will do that off camera as well. Yeah, I think I'm gonna just turn around and stop this video and get it edited so that you guys can see it. The paint job, you will have to stick around and see when we do a fight report for this guy. So if you are interested in the fight report for Strange Young Man, subscribe, because it will come out in next month sometime. I'm not sure exactly when, but it may even be out right now if you're watching this in the future. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next video.